I wanted to do a little impromptu video. It's like 10 o'clock at night here, and I'm sitting and working on my master's dissertation, trying to finish it, and I'm working on the subject of the Annunciation of Mary. And this is one of the pieces that we did in my first class that I had on the use of the devotional use of art in Christianity at the National Gallery. And this class specifically focused on Eucharistic seeing, and the importance that seeing as a sense played in the way the Eucharist functioned in like some of the earliest churches, where altarpieces hung, and the importance that the altarpiece played in providing Eucharistic and theological education to the ordinary person in the church participating in the Eucharist, which they would only be able to do maybe once a year. And for the rest of the year, they would stay seated, and the priest would perform the Eucharist. They would look at the altarpiece and participate through their senses, through seeing and through hearing, and that was primarily how they would participate in and receive the Eucharist. How this relates to this piece is really interesting. So this is on the National Gallery's website, and I really suggest everyone takes a look at the National Gallery website, because it's really amazing and so detailed. I mean, I'll show you now the amount of detail that you can see on the website, because what they do is they scan the artworks and upload it on like insane quality. So you see things on the website that you can't see in the gallery itself. So this piece is in the gallery currently, and I've seen it a few times. I always stop and look at it again because it was just really beautiful to me. And the details that I'm going to show you now, you can't actually see in the gallery itself. So this is the Annunciation by Fra Filippo Lippi. He was one of the masters in the Italian Renaissance. I think let me just check key facts. Yeah, 1400s, 1450 was this made. So what the gallery website does is give you the key facts. So this is the Annunciation made by Fra Filippo Lippi. This is when he was born. It was made for the Medici family, so the famous, very, very rich and super influential Medici family in Florence. And this would have been a piece that hung over a door. So it wouldn't even have been part of an altarpiece per se. But again, the question raises then, what is an altarpiece? How do you engage with a piece of art? Where is it situated? So yeah, this was just made for the Medicis. And then they just tell you in what room it is, the inventory number, how did the gallery acquire it, and then they give you a description as well. So you have a little overview, short overview, and then for some of the pieces they give a more in-depth description, which is really interesting and you can take a look at. But specifically, what I really personally love about this piece is the way that our Professor Ben Quash spoke about this, when he spoke about Eucharistic seeing. And what I specifically focus now on is the presentation of Mary as a virgin and her perpetual virginity. and what this meant, and also in terms of how the church fathers kind of hid her connotation with sexuality. So the early Christian thinking was that women were all identified as Eve. Eve was the only type of woman you could be, because Eve set the example, and all women afterwards were cursed with exactly the same kind of sexualness that caused the fall. So that's a whole different part of my master's, which I really enjoyed, looking specifically at the Eve as a figure of temptation, and how actually there's a part in Christian art that created a whole theological narrative surrounding that specific temptation. And so that's really interesting. But anyway, off track. I'm looking at the Annunciation in terms of hiding Eve's sexuality, or her disconnect from Eve's sexuality, and how Mary was seen as a non-sexual woman, and that a woman could actually be that. It's weird logic, I know, but bear with me. So what I really love about this piece is the kind of reflection that it brings. Reflection in the sense of really connecting with an artwork, looking at it and reflecting on it, and trying to figure out what it brings to your life and understanding. And this seeing of an artwork, and the dialogue that happens between the viewer and the artwork itself is really interesting and reflected in this. The interesting part is when you really zoom in and you take a look at the most important part of this piece. Here we have the dove. This is the moment of conception, where Mary has agreed to receive the word of God, Jesus, by the angel Gabriel, and God's hand sends down the dove, or the spirit, and you can see the gold really showing how the dove descends, and it makes these circles. You can see more clearly here, which kind of shows how the dove descends down and interacts with Mary. And here you can see that the dove kind of speaks to Mary straight through her womb. And if you look here, there's a slit in her dress through which she then receives Jesus, however you want to state it. But what's interesting about this, and what Prof. Quash highlighted, is that the slit gives you an idea of the eye, an eye-opening, that this is an eye-opening event for the history of humanity, that this is the singular most important, if you then don't take into account yet the crucifixion and resurrection, but that this is the most singular point in Christian history, or then human history, if you want to put it like in that way. But that seeing is conception, and this is what the slit represents in the dress, that seeing is a type of conception. In terms of seeing in the context of the Eucharist, and the way that seeing as a sense was used within the early church and in the history of altarpieces, how seeing is a communal act, how we see each other, or then what we choose not to see, which leads us to either want to interact with each other, or ignore each other.